Hello friends, this is your host. My name is Jalaj. I'm glad that we are meeting again for this webinar. As you all know that we have been doing this webinar as a series. So this is the third topic we are going to take up today. Our first topic was with reference to how we can navigate ESOPs in turbulent times, followed with leveraging underwater options. Today we are going to talk more about the perspective of how ESOPs can be used in the context of currency options. Before going ahead, just a quick reminder on the rules. All the participants are requested to be on mute and switch off their videos. The session is going to be about an hour. The first 15 minutes will be with the speaker who's going to talk on the subject, followed by the last 10 minutes where we will take some questions. Participants can raise their questions through the common chat. So please keep in mind that that audio should be muted as well as your video should be switched off. Now, when we come to the context of the current situation, as we are seeing that as the COVID cases are spreading, and the kind of potential it has to take lives and overwhelm health systems, there is going to be a lasting response. So as businesses, how we can look at it is something where discussions are emerging day by day. Now, one of the discussion what businesses are having is how they look at their payroll cost, and that is being under the lens. And that is where we thought of bringing this subject today, that how we can look at payroll cost, where companies are looking to reduce it or defer it in the context of stock options, where stock options can be used as currency options. So let me introduce the speaker. He's MD of ESOP Direct, with having more than 30 years of on-field experience. He's a chartered accountant and a company secretary. So please welcome Mr. Harshu Ghate. Harshu, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jalaj. Very good morning to all of you, and I hope all of you are safe and healthy. As Jalaj mentioned, over the last 40 odd days, where all of us have been under the lockdown, we have come out with a series of topics with a very limited focus on stock options, as to how this instrument can be leveraged or can be used in the current scenario to the advantage of the companies and basically to satisfy your goals. So the topic of the day is how do we address, I mean, all of us are, as business organizations, are looking at reducing costs. We are looking at conserving cash. And we thought that how can we leverage this instrument in this context, and how companies can really make use of different structures and different designs to suit their objectives. So the context is, as we see, there is a change. There is a changed paradigm. Cash conservation, whether it is deferral or complete saving of cost, is the need of the hour, and it would be ideal if this deferral of the cost can be shifted to the market rather than company bearing it, and that is where stock options come in. Companies are looking at parallel strategies. So obviously the impact of COVID is going to be different for different industries, and for some of them it could be short term, for some of them it could be long term. So companies are looking at parallel strategies as to what do we do immediate here and now, and what do we do over next 12 to 24 months, and what do we do later. So this is something which we see, and I think this is something also which is going to drive how companies look at ESOPs. We also see that where cash conservation is going to be critical, other aspects of, when one talks about ESOPs, like dilution or impact on EPS, accounting charge, etc., they may get a second preference. So the top priority is going to be how do we conserve cash. In that context, when it comes to shareholders or investors, they may want to overlook dilution or impact on EPS if the company is able to save cash. Since all businesses are in, they are facing this turbulence and facing the crisis, the paramount objective of retention was never more important. So actually, even in the current situation where it's going to be a very, very fine balancing game in terms of reducing salaries at the same time keeping employees motivated, retention is always going to be a challenge. And obviously, every business is going to need key talent to come over this crisis. What is also very pleasant is to know is that even regulators have been quite, they have been quite sympathetic to the business requirements, and we have seen several relaxations, be it from RBI or from SEBI or from Company Law Board, MCA, and so on. So I think overall this environment looks where all the stakeholders are willing to be flexible in their approach, which we see is a good sign for coming out with something which is more innovative. In view of this change paradigm, I think the problem statement that we are trying to address today is, while salary cuts are imperative, but can it be done without being cost to the employee? And that is the problem statement we are trying to address. And we feel that currency options, as we are calling them, where we use ESOPs as a currency, can be a solution to this problem statement, wherein we leverage the flexibility in approach of stakeholders, and we try to replace cash with a relevant equity instrument. So this is the context in which we are presenting this solution. Now, if we were to map the currency options to the change paradigm, the first thing that we have seen is the need for conservation of cash. And where currency options can be structured is you can link salary cuts to potential benefits. So obviously, when one looks at salary cuts, they are not the same across all the levels of organization. So the grant of these options can be varied depending upon the extent of salary cut to a particular level. So typically, one also sees the 80-20 rule when it comes to payroll costs, where 80% of the cost is of 20% of the people. So this also can be used where you can use currency options for those 20% of the people while addressing the 80% of the cost, whereas others you may want to continue with some kind of deferred cash incentive or something like that. For some of us who are not listed, where stock is not liquid, one can provide for a fallback where the options can also be settled in cash if for whatever reason at the time of exercise, if the shares are not liquid. So that's a design issue which can be addressed for companies which are not listed. It is also possible to grant in-money options instead of granting options at the market price. One can also look at different structures as to, and we'll talk about some of them in the coming slides. The second paradigm that we are looking at is companies are looking at parallel strategies. So you may have a different plan for the next, say, 12 months, and you may have a different plan for, say, next, from 12th to 24th month and so on. So it is possible to tweak your vesting schedule based on the term that you are looking at. For example, you may have a different vesting schedule for the next 12, 15 months, and it could be different, say, from 24th month onwards. So one can tweak the vesting schedule based on, how do you see your business recovery. You may also grant, look at a normal, market value option when the things are, when it's business as usual, say maybe 24 months down the line. But you may look at a different structure when the situation is more volatile. You may also take a stand that we only want to address short term now. We don't want to, because no one knows how it's going to shape up, say after 12 months, 24 months. So you can also look at these options just to address immediate problem for the next 12 months. The other paradigm shift that we see is companies are saying that cash in hand is better than a notional cost or a lower EPS. So as we all know, ESOPs, whether they're granted at a market price or at a discount, they all carry accounting cost, especially those who are following Ind AS. So any issue of options is going to mean accounting charge. But we also know that it's a notional cost and there's no reliability. At the same time, that expenditure is also tax deductible. Usually, market analysts ignore this cost when it comes to their, recommendations. So this is where we see a different structures could also be accepted by the market analysts or by, say, proxy firms or even the shareholders. The other implication of this is what companies are saying is even a deferral of cash is a cash saved. So instead of paying now, even if we are required to pay after 24 months, that is fine. So for unlisted companies, that is something that can be looked at where your shares are not liquid. Obviously, maximum gains of currency options is going to come when company is not only saving cash, but the payout also happens from the market. So that will be the most ideal situation. As I said, retention of key talent is going to be all the more important, especially when businesses want to recover. And here the grants can be tilted or tweaked to focus more on people who are going to be more critical. So this is where we see that all the paradigms that we are seeing, how they can be addressed through the currency option. Now, what we are going to see is how we can, what are the scenarios these options can address. So, I mean, there could be many scenarios. We have covered 4 scenarios in this presentation here. The first is companies who are wanting to do salary cuts, say in this financial year, how can that be compensated with equity? And which instrument, what structure can be looked at to address the heartburn that may come because of salary cuts. The second is giving increments. I mean, obviously, there are pockets within the company where you can't afford to do salary cuts, especially people who are, or functions which are going to be critical even in this recovery period. So there, how can we, instead of giving cash increments, how can we give it through equity, and which instrument we can use for that? Many sectors, almost all the sectors, have seen a sharp fall in their stock prices, and some of them has been, I would say, realistic. Some of them have also been unrealistic. It is just for, just because markets are falling, all stocks are falling, not necessarily inherently any, those businesses are weak, but it is just the herd mentality. So some companies may want to take advantage of these lower stock prices, and we'll see which instrument can be used for that. Since we have just crossed the financial year, I'm sure there are annual incentives, performance incentives, bonuses for the last year, which companies need to settle. And we have looked at a scenario whether even the past dues of employees, can they be addressed through some form of equity instrument? And that is the 4th scenario we are addressing. As I said, there could be more scenarios than this, but these are the 4 buckets that we felt would address most of the situations. Coming to the first one as to how do we compensate salary cuts with equity. So here we are suggesting, something like a RSU or a deep discount options. I mean, maybe all of us are aware about it, but RSU, the exercise price is the face value of the share, and as the diagram shows, since the face value is quite low, the options are almost always in the money unless the stock prices go below the face value. So no matter the turbulence, no matter what is the recovery period, these options will always be in the money. And wherever employees are feeling short of cash because of pay cuts, they could be told that this is as good as cash for you, which is in the form of equity, but you can maybe encash it over a period of time. That communication can always happen. As I said, here the vesting schedule can be tweaked based on your period when your business will stabilize. For example, if you see that there is going to be a turbulence for the next 24 months, then maybe a vesting itself could happen after 24 months, or it could be a cliff vesting where you see a sharp recovery happening. You could give that cash immediately after 1 year. Or there could also be a back-ended vesting where you see a fairly long-term impact on your business. What is important here is this is a completely risk-free instrument as far as employees concerned. So normally we have seen that employees are a bit skeptical because they don't see them controlling the stock prices. So they feel that I am being penalized for something which I have no control. In this case, it's a completely risk-free instrument. So the options will always be in the money. So this is a comforting factor for the employees. And if you feel the situation is such that employees need to be given maximum comfort, then something like an RSU could be used. As we will see in the subsequent examples, RSUs by definition would mean a lesser dilution. So wherever we have, constraints in terms of promoters' equity dilution or investors not very willing to dilute more at lower prices, this instrument can ensure that you can satisfy the employees without much dilution. As I said, this is risk-free for the employee. It's large and assured benefit to employees. Obviously, what it appears here is that in case the recovery in the price is much faster than expected, or if the recovery curve is much sharper, it could mean that employees gain much more than what they have lost. It is likely. In that case, however, one can always tweak the future compensation structures so that employees are made aware that whatever was taken away in the form of salary cuts, the employees have more than benefited. So one important thing which we feel companies need to understand and appreciate is currency options is not to be compared with any other option. So if we say that in a normal course, ESOPs are used as a something which will give significant benefits or multiples of salary as a benefit, then currency options are not meant for that. Currency options are meant to address a particular problem on hand. So the idea is not to give abnormally high benefit to employees. The idea is to make sure that whatever loss they incur because of cuts or because of deferral of increments, etc., so that is made good in some form. So I think companies and managements would be well within their right to tweak future compensation if they feel that currency options have delivered more than what was expected. So in that sense, this could be a deviation from the normal ESOP philosophies that the companies would have. Here we have just explained this through an example. For example, if a company has an annual payroll cost of say 400 million rupees, and if you want to cut salaries effectively of 15%, so saving is 60 million rupees. If your face value is 25, if you issue 2 million RSUs, and with a vesting 2 years cliff, 100% vesting after 2 years, and if your prices were to go up from say 25 rupees to 40 rupees, the employees can make the lost 60 million rupees, whatever they lose because of salary cuts. So this is a very simple example just to explain. So obviously, whether 2 million is too much, whether companies have aptitude to fund it, to dilute so much is something which will depend from case to case. But this is just to show an example that one could use 2 million RSUs to sort of make good this 15% cut. Coming to the next alternative, where you want to give increments. So for some of those critical employees where salary cut is not possible, but at the same time you'll have to also give increments because they are going to be more critical. This is a very unique concept and not tried in India by many companies, very few companies actually, 1 or 2 companies that we know of, is the concept of self-adjusting exercise price. So basically what you are saying is, I want to give you 15% increment, but I cannot give you cash. So I will give this increment in the form of equity, and it will be structured in such a way that the benefit to you will be capped at 15%. So obviously the objective is not to give 30% or 50% upside to the employee, at the same time covering his downside risk. So no matter whether the stock price falls below the current price, the employees, the options will always be in the money. So let me explain this. So in this example, as we see on the grant date, if the market price is 25, then you grant these options with a variable exercise price, wherein the document or the scheme says that whenever the employee is exercising these options, the exercise price that he has to pay will be at say 50% discount, to the market price, or a 15%, I mean some percentage discount to the market price on the date of exercise. So he is always paying exercise price which is lesser than the market price. Whether the price goes up or goes down, he will either pay more or he'll pay less, but he will always be in the money. And this discount to the market price can be structured in such a way that it compensates or it amounts to the increment which you are wanting to give to these employees. So though this is a very unique structure and not sort of used much in India, this is quite commonly used, and more so, I mean, this has a very limited objective. So what you are trying to say is you want to cap the gains, at the same time protect the downside for the employee. So he is never having underwater options, he is always in the money. At the same time, his gains are also capped. They cannot be more than 15% on the date of exercise. So that is this instrument, and I mean, the capping of the gains can also be used in other instruments. And as I said, in case of an RSU, if the employee has made significantly higher gains, it can always be adjusted in the future grants or future increments or bonuses that are being paid to him. So the crux here is we are talking about an instrument which caps the gains, and it is also possible that many of us are not sure as to how the market price is going to move. If we feel that next 12 months are going to be difficult, but we don't know how much difficult, right? Or we don't know whether the recovery after 12 months is going to be like a sharp V kind of a structure, or it will be more gradual. So in that situation, instead of taking a bet by issuing, say, a market price options, or even playing too safe by issuing a RSU, companies can look at this instrument, which is like playing, the employee, swings or along with the market swings. So in that case, it can be a good win-win for both. In this instrument, apart from a traditional option, one can also structure a stock appreciation right, where the dilution could be lesser. So one variant of this instrument can also be stock appreciation right. So this is a quick example of, again, showing that if the same, if you have to give 15% increments, valuing about 60 million rupees, if your price is 40 rupees at the end of 2 years, your variable exercise price will be 20 rupees, 50% discount. So your benefit will be 20 rupees per unit, and with a 3 million options granted, you can make good the 60 million increments. So this again is an example just to simplify a simple situation. This can always be tweaked to suit a company's requirement. As I said, this is a unique instrument. This has not been tried out earlier much, but this is very much within the legal parameters, very much within SEBI regulations, very much within, of course, RBI doesn't have any much say in this, but all regulations, MCA guidelines, all of them have nothing which will, sort of prohibit use of these options. The third situation we are trying to address is wherever stock prices have taken a sharp beating for valid or invalid reasons. Many companies are facing a situation where they feel that prices have fallen far below than what they should be. In which case, companies can look at ESOPs as a market price options. These are like normal options. So they are issued at the current market price. And obviously, if the prices were to fall below than where they are today, obviously we'll have a situation where options will be underwater. And companies will have to be cognizant of this fact, like any other option, like even current options. If companies have issued, many of them may be still underwater. But so if you are going to issue market price options, one will have to live with this risk. Companies as well as the employees will have to live with this risk of having underwater options. This is more relevant where investors or shareholders feel that the fall in prices is unrealistic, and we are bound to bounce back immediately after the gravity of the situation where to go. So they are not willing to dilute much at the current prices. Maybe some of them also feel that we are better off paying cash than giving stock because the prices are abnormally low. So in such situations, one can look at this. This will be difficult to sell to the employees unless they are also convinced that the fall in the price is unrealistic. This may face some resistance from employees unless they are convinced. The other feature to be looked at here is the potential benefit that these options will give are going to be much less and much less certain than the other alternatives that we have seen. So that is a That is the important consideration while looking at market price options. Obviously, from a shareholder point of view, this solution provides the least dilution. Again, here we have come up with the same example of 60 million cost saving. You will need 4 million options. So since they are market price options, if you have to make good the 60 million loss to the employees, we'll have to issue 4 million options. Now this is going to be much more than the 2 or 3 million that we have seen earlier. However, shareholders would want to sort of tweak this because they would want the employees to ensure their skin in the game rather than giving something free. So we see this as a very less likely route to be followed by the company because it is not serving the immediate problem. However, we have seen in the market, it's all in the news that some companies have still gone ahead and told the employees that we'll grant you options at market price. Some companies have gone ahead and done that. I don't know how has been the response to them, but in our opinion, this is not likely to, give comfort to the employees as well as help companies in saving cash, because in a turbulent market price options are not likely to give cash benefits. So in that sense, they may not really work as a currency. The last option we are looking at is in case you have accrued incentives of last year. It could be performance bonus or it could be annual incentives, which are yet to be settled, and you are looking at options as to whether we can do without paying it in cash. So this instrument, again, not very commonly used in India, but very, very actively used in the Western markets, is the concept of stock purchase plan. So what you are telling the employee here is there is no option involved here. You are directly issuing stock to the employee, and it could be at it could be at any value that you want, right from starting from face value to current market price, whichever price point makes sense for you. You are directly shares to the employee at this price. From a regulatory point of view, there is a minimum 1 year lock-in for this. So it may mean a deferral. So it's not a currency where immediately employee can sell. So you can sell only after 1 year. But this is an instrument which gives immediate equity in the hands of the employees, and which they can encash after 1 year. So basically, you are deferring your payouts by 1 year, and not only deferring, but when the employee sells it in the market is going to pay for it. So you are basically transferring the onus of the payment from the company to the market. Typically, stock purchase plans in the US or the Western countries are used where companies want to do broad-based employee ownership. So similarly, here in the case where your annual incentives or bonuses are across the organization, and in terms of the amounts, they can be quite significant. So if this is an instrument where you can cover larger number of employees. So it's only a matter of issuing shares to them, which they can sell after 1 year. So there is no option, there is no vesting, there is no exercise period. So that it makes it that much more simpler for the employee to understand this instrument. Obviously, since there is an immediate issue of equity, there is a upfront dilution, which in case of a typical option plan, your dilution gets deferred over a period of time as and when exercises happen. But here, the dilution is upfront. It may also mean that the employees have to pay some notionally some cost, but that is something which is, if you issue at a face value, that is something which can be managed by the company. One can structure it in such a way that there is no cash outflow for the employee immediately. Obviously, there are going to be some concerns, and since structuring options in the way we are suggesting is as we have seen, some of these options are, some of these alternatives are not which have been used in the past. But obviously, our positioning is that I mean, just as we have never faced this situation in the past, the solutions also have to be unconventional and out of the box. But having said that, there are bound to be some apprehensions and some concerns, and we have tried to address that as well. So one of the concern is, will the employees be convinced and willing to swap cash with options? We all know that typically options have not been very broadly used, in the sense not many employees in the organization are covered. Typically about 5 to 10%, 15% employees are covered. If while doing this, if your salary cuts are going to be covering, say, 50% or 60% of your employee base, and if you are wanting to give options to them who have never seen it earlier, obviously employees are going to need, there's need to be more convincing done. Another important thing is, will the employees be in sync with company's estimation of a turnaround? As we go lower in the hierarchy, the line of sight between the employees' performance and the company's performance gets more and more blur, and so employees, even at a middle level management, are not very. I mean, they don't see it in the same way as say a senior management or the directors would see it. So one will have to companies will have to work on basically bringing employees on board when we are talking about a turnaround situation. Some of these instruments that we spoke about would need some different thinking from shareholders, proxy firms especially, and in case of unlisted companies, even the private equity investors, whether they would want or whether they would agree for issuing options at a discount or even at a face value. So as I said, so far they have not been looking at these structures very favorably when it was business as usual. So we do see that they would give would agree to this if this is going to help companies save cash and survive longer, survive through this period. But that concern is always there, and different companies will have a different take on it. For unlisted companies, if we are going to provide for a fallback cash, so in case shares are not liquid, companies will undertake to make the cash settlement. Then the question would be, how is this different than a deferred cash incentive? So obviously, if the companies are unlisted today and they will also be unlisted, say 3 years, 4 years down the line, then obviously this instrument is going to be no different than any other cash incentive, deferred cash incentive. The only difference here is this will work like a phantom plan, where the payout, the amount of payout is linked to the change in the business valuation of the company. Whereas in any other deferred cash incentive, it is normally a percentage of salary, not linked exactly to the valuation, of the company. So this is where one can make a difference between a normal deferred cash incentive and say a phantom. The last one is salary cuts. I mean, if it is covering almost like all employees, do your employees, say at a worker level or at a service delivery person level, whether they understand and appreciate the option mechanism, and whether one can look at these options at all for those levels. So as I said in the beginning, typically any payroll of a company follows the 80-20 rule, and most of the people, though they may be high in number, they would typically constitute 20% of the payroll cost. So just in case it is impossible for companies to convince employees at those levels, companies can look at some kind of a deferred cash plan for them, whereas for those who consume 80% of the payroll cost, companies can look at these currency options. So that is where we see some of these concerns getting addressed. We'll be glad to hear if there are any more concerns. Obviously, we will be in touch with you, and if you, in real situations, if you feel that there are going to be more such concerns, please do write to us, and we can see how even those can be factored in when we think of some design. So the response, I mean, these are not necessarily responses are not necessarily to each of the concern, but generally, you know, any out-of-the-box design or any out-of-the-box situation is going to need increased trust between the employer and employee. And I'm sure in the day-to-day communication that all of us are having with our employees, this factor is going to be communicated more and more, and all other intangible efforts will be taken by companies to ensure that employees really believe in whatever is being told to them, or whatever you know, a positive turnaround that companies are talking about is really you know, are really convinced about it. So any you know, any situation, and also currency options, assumes that you know, employees are going to believe in whatever employer does. These out-of-the-box designs, obviously, apart from convincing the shareholders and directors and the senior management of the company, it is also going to need a lot of communication with the employees and explaining them as to what are we doing and how it is even for both the company as well as the employees. As I said, stakeholder perspectives are changing, and as we go more on this path, as more and more you know, companies are hit with the realities of the situation, I think the stakeholders are also going to be more flexible, and all stakeholders are going to come on the same page when it comes to that a single way, or the single most important way of surviving in this uncertainty is being liquid and being you know, cash positive. So for the time being, these stakeholders may take and should take a favorable view of something which is being done more as a stopgap and more as a response than as a structural. I mean, we are not suggesting that currency options should be there even after business as usual. So this is a response to the situation that we have, and this can and should be discontinued immediately when we see we are at you know, business as usual. So in that context, I think it should be easier to convince all the other stakeholders to fall in line and, you know, have a single objective of you know, how do we pass through and how do we survive through this period. So that is in brief on what we felt as likely concern, and as I said, if there are any more concerns which you would face you know, on a day-to-day situation, or you are likely to face, please do write to us, and you know, we'll be glad to figure out something as to how that situation can also be addressed. Finally, the takeaways of this session. So as I said, we are presuming, or this whole concept of currency options, the response is based on the assumption that deferral of cash payout, conservation of cash, is going to be paramount important, no matter which business we are talking about. The other takeaway which we feel is what we are suggesting is unconventional. It is not used, but we are pretty sure, we are 100% sure that this is very much within the regulatory framework. And this is something which should help. And so it is important to know that unconventional situations are going to need unconventional approaches. I think the key is going to be how do we define or how do we map a given need to a given instrument. So what will have to be seen is what is the value that we are taking away from the employee and what is the value we are delivering in the form of equity. I think that is going to be a true test as to whether this is going to work or not. And as I said, even if there are some, in reality, if the situation is different than what you assume today, there is always a way of course correction, in terms of future actions that the companies would take. Finally, we believe that something like this, currency options, has the potential to bring about a fundamental change. And I think almost every aspect of business is going to be questioned. And in case of executive compensation, in case of employee compensation, I think companies would be looking at these aspects, fundamentally differently than what they have been looking at so far. So far, ESOPs have been looked upon as a long-term incentive, and rightly so. But the instrument and the variations of the instrument also have the potential to suit a very specific company requirement, or to suit a very specific, economic, requirement as we are facing now. And I think this is something which has never been tested earlier because it was not required. But one thing that we wanted to communicate through this webinar is to let everyone know that options can be tweaked to suit your immediate requirements. I mean, as short as a 1-year requirement, and it can be structured in such a way that it's a win-win for the employees as well as the employees. So that is where I would like to end this webinar, and would be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Harshu. Yeah, thank you, Harshu. It was really good to know your views and see options on the currency perspective was really helpful and motivating. So Harshu, I'll ask some of the questions which have come from the participants, and I'll also be pleased if I can ask my question as well. So begin with there's a question which is coming from an unlisted company perspective, whether unlisted company how they can use phantom stock plan, and what will be the position there to avoid an accounting charge.
Phantom, I mean, any option, as I said, whether it is stock option or a phantom option, I don't think accounting charge is something which can be avoided. So what we are saying here is earlier accounting charge, as early as like 6 months ago, accounting charge of options was like a boardroom discussion. But I think in the new scenario, I don't think anybody is going to look at accounting charge that seriously, especially if it's not a cash settlement. I mean, in case of an unlisted company, phantom options, there is going to be a certain payout. So it is not, it is, that would continue to be at the top of the mind. But I don't think accounting charge can be avoided in case of a phantom.
Yeah, and in case of phantom, the accounting charge will be higher as compared to a typical stock option, because there, the companies have to, make provision on a mark-to-market basis. So, the cost will be on a higher side in case of a phantom program. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Actually, there's another question, and our audience would like to know, as we have seen you saying that in case of an RSU, the dilution is lower as compared to a stock option program. So can you explain in brief as to how this is possible?
Yeah. So let me just go back. I know it's a bit difficult. Yeah. So we are on this RSU slide where we are seeing the on the diagram we are seeing the green, which is like the the benefit that the employees are going to make. So as I said in the example in the table, if you want to give 60 million rupees worth of saving, benefit to the employee, you will need only 2 million RSUs, because the benefit per RSU is going to be significantly high. In this case, you are going to issue at 10 rupees where the market value is 40 rupees. So benefit per option is going to be 30 rupees, which is significantly high per option. That's why you need less number of options to give the same benefit. So as I said here, this benefit looks too high and maybe you don't want to give so much benefit. So in that case, you can reduce the number of grants, number of RSUs that you give per employee. And that is how the the overall dilution can be lesser as compared to any other.
Yeah.
Jalaj, you have any more questions?
Yeah, sure. On the on that note, just to add another pointer over there, that in case of an unlisted company who are trying to implement in this situation, whether this is stock options and RSU or a SAR, but ultimately if there is no market, they have to get a surrender of these instruments and pay them off in terms of cash. So how do you see, is there any benefit in that? Is it not just a deferment of cash incentive? So what is your view in that context is one of the questions which has come from our participant.
No, Jalaj, sorry, I didn't get the question right. What is the?
Yeah, so the question is that the company which has implemented, and this is an unlisted company which implements an instrument given this situation to sort of address whether this is salary cut or paying off incentive, as we have seen in our scenarios. And this company at the end of the period will have to settle this in cash. So is it not working like just like any other deferment or any other cash incentive?
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, firstly, the presumption is deferment is as good as saving in today's context. So that is first presumption. The second is, yeah, I mean, the difference between a cash incentive, deferred cash incentive, and a phantom, as I said, is a linkage to the performance or linkage to the valuation of the company. So fundamentally, that is the difference between a phantom and a deferred cash incentive. But when it comes to cash flow, the only thing currency options can do, or for that matter, phantom can do, is defer that cash, because there is no market to sort of take care of that liquidity. So yeah, in an unlisted scenario, we may have some limitations in terms of using this.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the final question which I want to ask, and this is my question to you, as we have seen these situations, and this can happen. All the situations can happen in a company. So whether a company can try multiple instruments here, or it should try one instrument and then look at the other problem and treat it in a different way. So from your perspective, what do you think as a company, whether it's advisable to go and go ahead and implement these multiple instruments, whether these are RSUs or variable exercise price stock options or SARs, or for that matter stock options at one go?
Yeah, so what we have tried to do here is link a instrument to a to a scenario. So if, for example, companies have more than one of these scenarios and you want to address all of them, then I mean, technically it is possible to have more than one of these instruments being used. If you have 2-3 problem statements on hand, you can use that. It's also a function of what is the appetite for the employees to sort of take this as a form of cash or near cash. So I think a lot will have to be done by companies in terms of communicating the value that is being given and the relevance of whatever is being done, and that is where the trust and the the faith in the company management, the ability to see a market situation and the need, how sharp is this need for whether how the company is justified in doing whatever it is doing. So all of that will have to be understood by employees, and if the appetite is good, obviously, I mean, companies can use all of these instruments at one go.
So there would not be any regulatory challenges I see here.
No, there will not be any regulatory challenges. I mean, obviously, whatever shareholder approval and all that will have to be done, but which is fine. I mean, that's a procedural matter. I don't see any regulatory challenges in this.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Harshu, for sharing your ideas. It was really enlightening, and at the same time, I'm sure it will help all our participants to get a view on the flexibility which we have with stock options, and especially on the design side of it. So I'll also thank all the participants who have joined, and if they have any question, they are most welcome. They can write to us. We'll surely try to address it. We'll also share a feedback form after this webinar is over, and request all participants to fill their responses. So with this, I'll call for the close. Thank you, Harshu, once again, and thank you, participants, for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.